There's an uncomfortable, and deeply disturbing truth that no one really wants to face, admit, or seriously contemplate. If you have few or virtually no genuine friends in your life, it's usually not accidental or random. It's not just bad luck. It's not just the result of external circumstances completely out of your control. It's not just because people these days don't value real friendship, or because no one really wants to invest in real friendship. The reason you find yourself socially isolated, whether completely alone or with just one or two superficial relationships that leave you feeling even emptier, has much more to do with specific, deep-rooted characteristics, repetitive behavioral patterns, and particular personality traits that you've probably developed and refined over the years. These traits are rare in their purest, most heightened form, and this extreme rarity is exactly why people who possess them often find themselves profoundly alone, isolated, virtually socially invisible, despite technically being surrounded by other people. The chronic social isolation you experience is not a random punishment from the universe. It is a natural, inevitable, and predictable consequence of who you fundamentally are and how you choose to interact, or refuse to interact, with the people around you. The fundamental truth about extreme loneliness is that it usually doesn't come from a single isolated factor. It's not just because you're introverted, because there are millions of introverted people who maintain meaningful friendships and deep relationships. It's not just because you have social anxiety, because people with genuine anxiety can build genuine connections when they develop the appropriate tools. It's not just because it's different or unusual, because difference and rarity can be extremely attractive to the right people. The reason you probably have few friends is because you possess a very specific combination of psychological, behavioral, and even spiritual traits that, together, create an almost magnetically repellent isolation. These traits work like an invisible shield that keeps people physically close but psychologically distant. They prevent genuine vulnerability. They block emotional reciprocity. They sabotage the possibility of real intimacy. The first rare trait that people with few or no friends often possess is an extreme and deeply rooted emotional coldness, combined with a structural inability or deliberate unwillingness to show any kind of genuine vulnerability in front of other people. And when I say emotional coldness, I'm not talking about simply being dispassionate, restrained, or not showing emotions in an exaggerated and dramatic way. I'm talking about an invisible but absolutely impenetrable barrier that exists between your secret, private inner world and the shared world of other people. It's as if there's thick, armored, soundproof glass between you and humanity. You can see people clearly, you can talk to them functionally, you can interact with social conventions, but you genuinely can't truly let them in on any deep level. There is no bridge that people can cross to get to their authentic self. People feel this instinctively, even if they can't articulate exactly what they feel or why they feel that way. They come to you expecting to find a genuine, real, vulnerable person, and instead they find a mask, a facade so well constructed, so perfectly maintained, so convincingly presented that it seems almost real when viewed from afar. But when they get close enough, when they start asking for access inside, they realize that there is no accessible inside. And people can sense when something isn't real, when there's a fundamental discrepancy between the surface and what supposedly lies beneath. This is deeply disturbing on a primal level. This extreme emotional coldness manifests itself in many specific and repetitive ways in how you relate to the world. You might be someone who can talk about virtually any complex intellectual topic, philosophy, science, politics, arts, technology, history, whatever, with a crystal clear fluency and an intelligence that clearly impresses those around you. You may have a keen and perceptive sense of humor, a genuine ability to make intelligent and insightful observations, a superficial social competence that works well in controlled and predictable environments, such as seminars, classes, or professional settings. Can you navigate the surface of social interaction with almost perfect precision? But when the conversation inevitably tries to move into something personal, when someone tries to share something vulnerable with you or invites you to do the same, when a person tries to create a space of emotional intimacy, you simply withdraw. Your response is instantaneous and automatic. You manage to change the subject with such calculated surgical precision that it seems natural. You can make a well-timed joke or comment that completely diffuses the emotional tension that was being created. You manage to offer a rational, distant, and appropriate response that technically addresses what was said, but completely avoids and sabotages the emotional intimacy that was genuinely being offered to you. After several attempts, and people genuinely try to cross this insurmountable barrier, they simply give up. They conclude, often correctly, that you fundamentally don't really want to know them in any deep sense, that you're not interested in genuine emotional reciprocity with them, that you are content on your isolated island, and that they are not welcome there. The reason this emotional coldness is so effective at pushing people away is that it violates one of the most basic psychological needs of human beings, the need to be known, truly known by another person. Humans were not meant to exist in complete emotional self-sufficiency. We are creatures who thrive when we can allow ourselves to be vulnerable with someone, when we can say the things that matter most without fear of judgment, when we can be seen, really seen, in all our complexity and contradiction by another human being. When you simply refuse to offer that, when you keep your inner life completely compartmentalized and off limits, you are literally blocking out the only thing that truly creates meaningful friendship. You may have acquaintances, people you spend time with, but you won't have true friends, because true friendship requires vulnerability, and you refuse to be vulnerable. It is interesting to note that this emotional coldness often has deep roots in childhood experiences or unprocessed relational trauma. Maybe you grew up in an environment where emotions weren't allowed, where vulnerability was seen as weakness, where sharing your feelings was followed by ridicule or neglect. Maybe you learned early on that it was safer to keep things to yourself, that letting people know how you felt really opened you up to injury. Perhaps he developed this coldness as a survival mechanism that worked perfectly well at that moment, that protected him, that was truly the rational response to an unsafe environment. But now that you're an adult, now that you're in different environments, now that you have access to potentially safe people, that defense mechanism has become a prison. It is protecting you from injuries that are no longer happening, but it is also ensuring that you can never experience the genuine connection you naturally desire. The second rare trait that isolated people often possess is a fundamental and practically incurable inability to genuinely listen to other people. Not because of a lack of intellectual capacity or literal hearing, but because of an obsession so deep, so all-consuming with their own thoughts, ideas, perspectives, and experiences that there simply is no genuine mental or emotional space for another person's valid reality. When other people talk, and especially when they share something they believe is important, you're not really listening in the sense that listening should mean. You're waiting for your turn to speak, already thinking about what you're going to say when you finally manage to interrupt or when the other person falls silent. It's actively thinking about how their story relates to your own experiences, how you can bring it back to yourself, how you can make it about you. You are simultaneously working out the answer you are going to give, the clever point you're going to make, the way in which you are going to demonstrate your own superiority or superior knowledge. You're constantly evaluating whether what this person is saying is smart enough, relevant enough, interesting enough to deserve your genuine attention. And very often, your automatic conclusion is that it isn't, which is trivial, which is less important than what you were thinking, which is a waste of your valuable mental time. Can you do a convincing simulacrum of listening? Can you give an appropriate response that sounds like you're engaged? Ask follow-up questions that seem relevant, simulate interest through facial expressions and verbal confirmations? But the naked truth is that you're mostly occupied with your own internal world, your own head, your own worries. This radical self-centeredness is often so automatic, so deeply ingrained in how you process reality, that you probably can't even realize you're doing it. From your own inner perspectives, you are simply engaging naturally in conversations, making what appears to be appropriate interests, maintaining an acceptable social relationship. You can genuinely believe that you are listening, that you are present. But other people always feel, when they're not really being heard, when their reality doesn't genuinely matter to you. It is one of the most deeply alienating, most dehumanizing things you can do to another human being, being present physically while being completely absent emotionally and psychologically. It is saying, without necessarily uttering the words, your experience, your feelings, your perspectives, your concerns are not important enough for me to give them my true attention, my true presence, my true interest. After experiencing this over and over again, after trying multiple times to share something that matters and being met with a lack of genuine engagement, people simply stop trying. They stop sharing meaningful things with you. They stop waiting for genuine reciprocity. They stop making themselves vulnerable. And eventually, they just disappear from their lives completely, because it's exhausting trying to connect with someone who can't or doesn't really want to be present with you. It's important to also understand that this type of self-centeredness often arises from deep-seated insecurity, not genuine confidence. People who were neglected, who didn't receive adequate attention as children, who learned that no one really cared about them unless they were extraordinary, often develop this internal hypervigilance about themselves. They are always trying to prove themselves, always worried about how they are being perceived, always trying to maintain control of the narrative. Genuinely listening to another person requires letting go of that vigilance, requires remaining present even if the other person talks about things that are not about you, requires validating the other person's existence without making it about you. For someone who is fundamentally insecure, this may seem impossible because they feel like they are losing control, losing the opportunity to prove themselves. The third rare trait that people with few friends often exhibit with disturbing clarity is an absolute, almost pathological inability to accept genuine criticism, negative feedback, disagreeing with something you've said, or having their perspective questioned in any way. I'm not talking about being sensitive. Many sensitive people can learn to accept constructive criticism and even benefit deeply from it, using feedback to grow and improve. I'm talking about a defensive reaction, so automatic, so immediate, so intensely disproportionate, that any suggestion, any mention that you were wrong about something, that you could have done something differently, that your perspective on something was incomplete or possibly incorrect, is literally received as a massive personal attack on your fundamental value as a person. Your psychological defense system immediately kicks in as if a security alarm had been triggered. You feel a wave of rejection, of shame, of anger. You either counterattack aggressively, finding fault with the other person's ideas, pointing out their real or imagined hypocrisies, completely devaluing their perspective and expertise, or you simply withdraw completely, ending the conversation with a cutting, scathing comment that makes it crystal clear that you don't want to talk about it anymore, and that the other person was foolish to try. What makes this trait of extreme defensiveness particularly isolating, particularly lethal to any kind of genuine friendship, is that true relationships, deep friendships that truly matter, absolutely require a certain degree of vulnerability to collaboration, of being genuinely willing to be influenced by another person's perspective, of being able to hear something that goes against your worldview and really consider it, require that you be able to say, "You have a valid point, I hadn't thought about it that way," or even simply, "You might be right about that, I'll think about it." Respect with openness and honesty. When you are completely incapable of doing any of these things, when you treat every disagreement, every criticism, every different perspective as a threat existential to who you are, you've created a relational dynamic in which literally no genuine friendship can flourish or grow. Because friendship isn't about two people agreeing on absolutely everything. It would be boring, it would be useless, it would be stagnant. True friendship is about two people who can challenge each other, who can learn from each other, who can evolve together through different visions. If you can't do that, if you need to be absolutely right all the time, if you need to win every argument and maintain your intellectual, moral, practical superiority over other people, then people will simply stop engaging with you on the deep, vulnerable level that genuine friendship requires. They will keep you at a distance. They will remain cautious. And eventually they will disappear from your life completely. The fourth rare trait that isolated people often possess is a preference so fixed, so inflexible, so non-negotiable for your own comfort that you simply can't make the basic effort that friendship requires. Friendship requires that you occasionally do things you don't want to do. It requires you to go places you would rather not go. It requires you to hear things you would rather not hear. It requires you to devote time and energy to problems that aren't technically your problems, but that matter to someone you supposedly care about. If you are someone who, when asked to go out, your first reaction is, "No, I'd rather stay home." If you are someone who, when a friend asks for help, your first reaction is to calculate how much of an inconvenience it would be for you and decide if it's worth it, then you will end up isolated. Because people can sense when they are a low priority in their life, and eventually they stop asking. This isn't about being introverted. Introverted people can engage in social activities even when those activities drain their energy. They can make an effort for people who matter to them. What sets this isolated person apart is that it's not just about draining energy, it's about an almost militant refusal to bother yourself, to step out of your comfort zone, to prioritize someone else over your own comfort. You've created a life so centered on your own terms, so optimized for your own convenience, that there simply isn't room for the inevitable demands that genuinely close people make of each other. The fifth and final rare trait that people with few or no friends often possess is a subtly, or not so subtly, communicated attitude of moral or intellectual superiority toward those around them. I'm not talking about someone who is simply smarter than the people around them. Extreme intelligence doesn't preclude friendship if the person can be genuinely interested in other people despite intellectual disparity. I'm talking about a communicated sense, through tone of voice, word choice, body language, how you choose to engage or not engage with other people's ideas, that you are fundamentally better, more evolved, wiser, more moral, more insightful than the people around you. People can feel that. They can sense when you are judging them, when you consider them inferior, when you are allowing their presence in your life as some kind of favor you are doing for them, not as something you truly value. This attitude of superiority can manifest itself in very subtle ways. It could be in the way you raise an eyebrow when someone shares something you consider trivial. It could be in the slightly condescending tone that enters your voice when you're explaining something obviously simple to someone who doesn't understand. It could be in the way you withdraw from hobbies, interests, or concerns that you consider beneath you. It could be in the way you interact with people's life decisions, implicitly communicating that you would have done things differently, better, smarter. It may be in the way you critically choose relationships, friends, and associations only with people who meet certain criteria of intelligence, education, status, or refinement that you have established. The impact of this attitude of superiority is deeply isolating because it creates a dynamic where no one can truly feel comfortable around you. People can sense when they are not being truly respected, when they are being judged, when they are considered fundamentally inadequate. And when you consistently feel this way around someone, you naturally start to pull away from them. You stop being yourself around them. You become more guarded, more careful, more focused on trying to impress them or prove yourself. And it's friendship. That's simply spending time with someone who makes you feel like you're less than. The fifth and final rare trait that people with few or no friends often possess is a deep, persistent, and often only subtly communicated attitude of moral, intellectual, or spiritual superiority to those around them. I'm not talking about someone who is simply smarter than the people around them. Extreme intelligence need not necessarily impede friendship if the person can be genuinely interested in other people despite intellectual disparity. I'm talking about a feeling, an impression, a vibe that you communicate through your particular tone of voice, careful choice of words, revealing body language, how you choose or don't choose to engage with other people's ideas, the level of respect you show or don't show for their perspectives, that you are fundamentally, essentially better as a person, more spiritually evolved, wiser, more morally refined, more insightful, more refined than the people around you. People can feel it with almost supernatural precision, even if you never say it out loud. They can sense when you are constantly judging them against your own standards and finding them inadequate. They can sense when you consider them inferior in some important dimension that matters to you. They can feel that you are allowing their presence in your life as some kind of favor that you are graciously doing for them, not as something that you actually value, seek out, or genuinely desire. This attitude of superiority can manifest itself in very subtle ways that you probably don't even recognize. It could be in the specific way you raise an eyebrow, just slightly, when someone shares something you consider trivial or not sophisticated enough. It could be in the slightly condescending tone that enters your voice when you're explaining something you consider obviously simple to someone who didn't understand it first. It may be in the way you deliberately withdraw from hobbies, interests, activities, or concerns that you consider beneath you, unworthy of your attention. It can be in the very specific way you interact with people's life decisions. When someone shares an important choice they made, you can implicitly communicate through your response that you would have done it differently, better, more intelligently. It may be in the way you critically choose your relationships, your friends, your associations, selectively seeking out only people who meet certain high criteria of intelligence, formal education, social status, or cultural refinement that you have established as acceptable. The toxic impact of this attitude of superiority is deeply isolating because it creates a relational dynamic in which literally no one can feel truly comfortable, truly relaxed, or genuinely accepted around you. People can sense, with a primal, almost animal sense, when they are not being truly respected on a fundamental level, when they are being judged and found wanting, when they are considered fundamentally inadequate or inferior. And when you feel this way consistently around someone, when you feel with every interaction that you're being evaluated, judged, found wanting, you naturally begin to move away from them gradually but consistently. You stop being yourself around them. You become more guarded, more careful, more focused on trying to impress them or prove yourself defensively. You monitor everything you say to avoid saying something they might judge as stupid or inappropriate. And that's absolutely not friendship. That's simply spending time with someone who consistently makes you feel like you're less than, like you're worth less, like you're not good enough. These 5 traits, when present together, create an almost impenetrable psychological shield that keeps others physically close but psychologically distant. Emotional coldness prevents vulnerability. The inability to listen prevents other people from truly feeling known and valued. Defensiveness toward criticism impedes the growth and mutual collaboration that friendship requires. A rigid preference for comfort prevents you from making the basic effort that maintaining friendship inevitably requires, and a persistent attitude of superiority prevents other people from feeling genuinely respected, valued, and accepted for who you really are. When you have some of these traits, you may be able to maintain superficial relationships that seem functional but are void of real connection. But when you have them all, when they work together synergistically, each reinforcing the others, you end up in almost complete isolation. The reason these 5 traits are so effective at creating isolation is that they are not obvious flaws that people can easily identify and ignore. They are deep, rooted, automatic. They are so integrated into how you process reality, how you relate to other people, how you see yourself in relation to others, that you probably can't even realize you're operating from them. From your internal perspective, you are just being yourself, having normal conversations, maintaining ordinary relationships. You probably believe you're doing the best you can. You may even believe that you're being more receptive and open than you actually are. But other people, watching from the outside, can clearly see the pattern. They can feel the refusal of vulnerability. They can feel that they are not really being heard. They can feel the judgment. They can feel the inflexibility. And they can feel the underlying disdain. And eventually, they just stop trying. The most important thing to understand is that these traits are not permanent. They are not immutable. They are not a sentence of eternal isolation. They are not who you fundamentally are at your deepest core. They are behavioral and psychological patterns that you have learned, often because they worked for you at some specific point in your life, offering protection or serving some adaptive purpose. Perhaps emotional coldness served as effective protection when you were a child in an emotionally neglectful or abusive environment where vulnerability was dangerous. Perhaps the inability to genuinely listen developed because you learned that you needed to be on constant hypervigilance, always ready to react, always thinking one step ahead for your own emotional survival. Perhaps defensiveness toward criticism developed because any criticism in your growing up environment was accompanied by severe humiliation or outright rejection. Maybe the inflexible preference for your own comfort developed because other people never really valued you or sacrificed for you, so why should you do any different for them? Perhaps the attitude of superiority developed as a sophisticated defense mechanism, a way of dealing psychologically with the deep underlying feeling that you were never really good enough. You overcome this fundamental deficiency by becoming superiorly good at something, achieving something, knowing more than other people. But recognizing these patterns in yourself is extremely uncomfortable, deeply uncomfortable, almost intolerably. No one really wants to hear, especially from themselves, that the fundamental reason you don't have friends is because you can't genuinely listen to other people, or because you're emotionally closed off and impenetrable, or because you're constantly judging people, or because you're too defensive and too reactive to allow genuine relationships to flourish. It's much easier to blame external circumstances over which you have no control, to blame other people for being superficial or deceptive, to blame fate or luck, or a complex combination of bad luck and circumstance. It's much easier to conclude that you just don't need a lot of real friends, that genuine friendships are rare and often disappointing anyway, that you're better off alone. It's much easier to convince yourself that your loneliness is a sign of special rarity, of being too evolved, of being beyond the trivial and petty concerns that ordinary people have about friendship and social connection. But if you truly want genuine change, if you truly want to experience genuine friendship, real connection, the true sense of being deeply known and valued by other people, you need to be willing to confront these patterns within yourself with radical honesty. You have to be willing to admit to yourself in your most private moments that maybe, just maybe, your loneliness is not accidental, that maybe you contributed to this, that perhaps the standards that protect you also isolate you. You need to develop the ability to be vulnerable, even if it scares you to no end, even if it leaves you exposed and potentially rejected. You need to develop the ability to really listen to other people, not just listen to the words, but truly listen, with genuine interest, with openness, without simultaneously crafting your response. You need to develop the ability to receive feedback, criticism, disagreement without automatically seeing it as a personal attack on your worth. You need to be willing to go out of your comfortable path, do things that you would sincerely prefer not to do, because those are the things that the people you supposedly love need. And you absolutely need to address the deep issue of superiority. You need to truly recognize and integrate that no matter how intelligent you are, how educated in formal settings, how morally refined you believe yourself to be, none of these things make you better than other people in any way that really matters in the context of genuine relationships. The fundamental truth about genuine relationships is that they require absolute humility. They require the ability to be open, exposed to yourself, potentially rejected by other people. They require you to consider another person's genuine well-being and legitimate perspective as equally important as your own well-being and perspective. They require you to accept that you don't have all the answers. No one does. They require you to recognize that other people have wisdom, perspective, and experience that you do not and will not have. They require you to accept that your particular way of doing things, your particular way of thinking, is not the only valid way or superior to the way other people choose to live. If you can't do these fundamental things, if your psychological defense is so strong that you can't penetrate it even when you want to, if your ego is so fragile that it can't tolerate any threat, if your heart is so guarded that you can't let other people get close, then you will remain alone. Not because it is a fixed and unchanging destiny, not because other people are all inadequate, but because you choose to be alone through every small decision you make to not open up, not to be vulnerable, not to allow yourself to be influenced or genuinely touched by another person. The choice, fundamentally, is yours and yours alone. You can continue in your comfortable isolation, rationalizing it in various sophisticated ways, convincing yourself that you don't need real friends, that people in general are disappointing and fake, that you're fine as you are now. That's a completely valid choice. The comfort of your isolation is real. The fear of change is real. The fear of being rejected if you open up is completely understandable. Or you can do the incredibly difficult, humbling, vulnerable work of dismantling the defensive patterns you've carefully built up over years, genuinely opening your heart, letting people get close to you, and finally discovering what it really is to be genuinely known and loved despite and through your own imperfect humanity and all its flaws. But if you want that last thing, if you genuinely want to experience real connection, you need to be willing to change. Not marginally. Not just in the most obvious points. Not just pretending to be open while actually remaining closed. You need to be willing to do a complete, radical review of how you relate to people, of how you think about yourself in relation to others, of how you choose to be each day, in each interaction, in each moment. And the question you really need to ask yourself, not me, not anyone else, but yourself in complete honesty, is this. Is this work worth doing? Is genuine change worth the discomfort? Is it worth abandoning the defenses you have so carefully built? Is it worth risking the rejection and vulnerability that comes with letting other people in? Or is it better to remain in your isolation, which is at least familiar, at least safe, at least predictable? These 5 traits, emotional coldness, inability to genuinely listen, excessive defensiveness, rigid preference for comfort, and an attitude of superiority, are rare in their combined intensity. This is why people who have them often find themselves deeply alone. But they are also exactly the things that you can work on, that you can change, that you can transform if you are willing to do the enormously difficult, honest, vulnerable work. It will be painful. Yes. It will be humiliating. Absolutely. It will be very uncomfortable and uncomfortable. More so than you can probably imagine at this point, because it means confronting deep truths about yourself that you'd probably rather never have to face. It means admitting that perhaps you're not as special, as spiritually evolved, as superior to others as you consciously or unconsciously believe. It means being genuinely vulnerable, that thing you spent decades learning to avoid. It means allowing people to see you as you really are. Flawed, imperfect, often scared, confused, human, just like every other human being. But it's the only real way out of isolation. It's the only way authentic Ho to experience the kind of genuine, deep, satisfying human connection that you know deep down in your heart that you deeply want, even though your rational mind has constructed sophisticated narratives about why you don't need it. What often happens with people who have these 5 traits is that they develop sophisticated internal narratives about their loneliness that prevent them from seeing the truth. They tell themselves they're alone because people just don't understand them, because other people are too shallow, because no one is smart enough to talk to them. They tell stories about how they wanted to maintain friendships, but other people didn't value them appropriately, about how they tried to be open but were betrayed or hurt. These narratives contain perhaps 10% truth, but are missing the 90% that is about their own contribution to isolation. They rationalize their lack of friends as confirmation of their special rarity, of being too evolved for the banal concerns of ordinary people. And this rationalization, while comfortable and protective, is also the thing that keeps them permanently trapped in isolation. Because as long as you believe the problem is that other people are inadequate, you have no power to change anything. But when you finally recognize that your own psychological makeup, your own defensive patterns, your own inability to let other people get close, this is what is creating and perpetuating your isolation, then you have power. You then have the opportunity to actually do something about it. The answer you genuinely find to that question, not the answer you think it should be, not the answer that feels morally right, but the unvarnished truth of what you really feel deeply, really want in your most authentic heart, really choose to do. That answer will absolutely determine whether your life will be one of permanent and increasingly deep and painful isolation, or whether you will finally be able to experience the genuine, deep, deeply satisfying human connections that you fundamentally desire, even if you cannot consciously admit it at this moment. The hope, if there is any in this grim scenario of self-created isolation, is that change is always possible at any time. You are not condemned to eternal and inevitable isolation. You are not fundamentally broken, irreparably or irretrievably broken. Those patterns you learned, that functioned as genuine defense mechanisms in an earlier time, that protected you when you really desperately needed protection, can be unlearned completely. They can be transformed, resignified, integrated differently. People discover how to genuinely open up, people learn to truly listen with real interest and genuine presence, people can become less defensive, less obsessively focused on themselves, less judgmental of others. People can let other people in through their defenses. And when they do this work, when they finally manage to make this deep and honest transformation, they often discover that the isolation they experienced was as absolutely unnecessary as you could imagine. That the people around you actually wanted to genuinely connect with you if you would just let them get close. That loneliness was a prison you built and carefully maintained, and that the key to getting out was always in your hands. Getting started is simple, although not easy. Start by observing, really observing your own patterns without judgment. When someone tries to open up to you, notice how you react automatically. Do you change the subject? Do you offer a joke? Do you offer a quick solution to avoid the discomfort of intimacy? When someone is talking about something important to them, about something that really matters in their lives, are you really, truly, genuinely listening with all your available attention? Or are you already mentally, subconsciously, preparing your response, your smart comment, your observation that will make it seem like you are smarter or more insightful than that person? When you receive feedback, what is your automatic reaction? Defense? Counterattack? Start noticing how often you prioritize your own comfort over connecting with someone else. Start noticing your judgments about other people, how you evaluate them, how you find them inadequate, how you communicate your superiority through little expressions, tones of voice, seemingly innocent comments. Just watch. You don't need to change anything yet. Just begin to see clearly, honestly, without denial or defense. Because only when you can clearly see your own automatic and defensive patterns, is that you have any real chance of actually turning them into something completely different. Your loneliness is not a permanent, immutable, and inevitable curse imposed on you by the universe. Your lack of genuine friends is not a direct reflection of your special rarity, or of being too intellectually evolved for ordinary people. It is actually a much more honest and much more raw reflection of your automatic behavioral patterns, your deep psychological blocks, your defenses that you have learned over many years of protecting yourself from harm. And that means you, and only you, have the power to change it. The first step is to just simply truly admit this to yourself, recognize and see it with crystal clarity, honestly, without the sophisticated rationalizations you have carefully constructed to protect your self-image and your view of yourself. The second step is to be genuinely, completely willing to do the deep, honest, tremendously humbling, deeply vulnerable work of genuine personal transformation. This is not reading a self-help book. This is not going to 1 or 2 therapy sessions. This is potentially decades of work to dismantle defensive structures that once protected you but now imprison you. And the third step is to let other people get close to you, really close, despite the fear. That's all. Too simple? Perhaps. But maybe you already knew this all along on some level. Maybe you just needed someone expressing out loud what you already knew silently, that your isolation is created by you, perpetuated by you through every small choice, and can be transformed and healed by you, if you really want to do this. If you're genuinely, deeply, completely willing to do the necessary work, the necessary sacrifice, the necessary change. If you're finally, truly, undoubtedly, irrefutably tired of being alone, of being isolated, of being trapped in this cycle of isolation that you have created for yourself. The ultimate truth, if you can bear it, is that you alone are responsible for your loneliness. Not other people, not the universe, not luck or destiny. You. And while this truth is incredibly uncomfortable, it is also incredibly freeing. Because if you created it, you can uncreate it. If you perpetuate it, you can stop perpetuating it. If you choose walls, you can choose to tear them down. Freedom is within your reach. You just have to be willing to pay the price for transformation. This is the truth you might not want to hear, but now you know. What you do with this knowledge is entirely up to you. Every person, at some point in their lives, wants to be understood. You want to feel like you belong to a circle of people who really know you, who accept you, who genuinely value you. This is a fundamental human need that transcends culture, geography, and historical context. It is as central to the human experience as breathing or eating. But for some people, this need remains cruelly unsatisfied. They find themselves surrounded by other people, but fundamentally alone. They exist in social isolation, often without fully understanding why. And the reason is often not accidental. The reason is rooted in patterns, in behaviors, and characteristics that these people have developed over the years. Characteristics that, no matter how justified or necessary they may seem, are actually creating and perpetuating your isolation in a systematic way.